I know, right? You can hear that.
Yeah.
Here's like,
It's
oh, yeah.
unreal.
I'm gonna see.
I just experienced it.
I do.
That's a
And
good
then
one.
I'm already short. I don't have any. Yeah, I have it.
Byron.
Nice to meet you.
I was with your this morning. And you were it was. I like seeing them. Those meetings are changing.
Yep.
I don't love that.
I'll make sure I've got my order of operation.
I don't run the office, so.
Nope. You bet. Nope, it's everything,
I don't like it.
including the can either survive these next 2.5 years or. Very nice. I have a very troubling time.
What's your warrior race? You started.
You took it early.
Maybe we have to use what God gave us.
Yes.
We'll be asking questions. We go with different agencies, different departments, sorry. So the first one is at Court Services 911. Interim Police Chief Petty, you have the floor.
We can start with that, Mayor, or the police department. Police department. Okay. Just wanted to make sure. Or I should go down that road. Start with the police department, Mayor, Commissioner, good to go?
Good to go.
Yes, sir. Okay. To start with, we'll talk about a little bit of fiscal year 22, some of the things that we've done for the police department. Last year's budget, we were able to get the
Page 6.
page 6.
Good to go. Thank you.
You bet. So this won't be on your pages. I just want to give you a few updates, what we did in fiscal year 22. We were able to get that control room space. When we moved into Blue Cross, that initial first floor space was cubicle island. That's all it was, one big space. We now got that sectioned off to where, or cordoned off, walled off to where now with the patrol rooms in there, and we actually able to secure it a little bit more, because you used to come up the elevator and you could basically, if you're able to get it downstairs, you could walk right through our building. So we were able to secure that. Got the patrol room. We have 6 workstations in there. We have a sergeant's office, actually have an office to meet with officers. So that went well. Our shooting range out there, we were able to get a little bit of a remodel done. The inside, that's been on the list for quite some time. Windows are coming, but flooring, everything, able to do that. We got COVID grants throughout the year, able to get tablets for the officers. A big part of the COVID stuff was staying 6 feet apart, being in your cars, being away from people as much as possible. So by officers having those tablets, they're able to work out of their cars. For the most part, almost every officer now has a tablet. Along with those tablets also come, there's Cradle Point, that's the internet connection. There's also hardware to connect it to the car. It's just not a tablet. So have to do that. I talked to you guys, the folks, about the CAT RMS system. Last year we secured the, that's a computer aided dispatch, the records management system. Last year we secured the consultant for that. And that was a big take on us getting that done. And so they're now on board and we're moving forward with that. One of my updates from our last meeting, we had the Joint Commission last Tuesday, is I've talked to the county and we're actually talking about some funding sources coming in. So I've had talked with Kelly McBride over at Pretrial or Criminal Justice Services and a few others about some grants, and then the county's also going to seek some ARPA funds. So that is moving forward just after that meeting we had on last Tuesday. Lexapol, we put all our policies in with Lexapol. We were able to get funding for that. We were the pilot project for, we were one of the pilot projects in the state for that. And we actually got the maintenance and operation fees paid for last year and this year with that. We're close to actually implementing that. They took all our old policies and they took what they have policies, and then they took federal, state, and local laws, combined it in one, and that's going to be our policies from there. I have a lot of policies to read in order to get those checked off, about 154. But we are on schedule to get that done. We ordered a bunch of crushed asphalt for that parks maintenance building. We have part of that for evidence storage. We tow a lot of cars. We impound a lot of cars. That outdoor storage was just really wasn't anything. It needed road mix and crushed asphalt. So we now have that. We can get cars in and out. actually stored more cars now. You guys are aware, but we did the new K9. He's on board, he's active. I'll be bringing him in front of the commission here soon, get through this budget stuff first. And then also last year, we did our very first Citizen Academy for the citizens of Helena. Mayor, I know you came to that and spoke, so I appreciate that, but it was very successful and very good program. So FY22 updates. I'd like to go to pages 11 through 14. That's the police M&O, the operations. So our operating budget for the police department did not see any increase. We were hit with the budget constraint as well. That was $162,800. Before we had to work in this budget constraint, we actually had worked our budget into where we were only about $800 off our operating budget from the year before. So I was very proud of that. We got hit with the budget constraint, sharpened our pencils. We're now sitting, we're able to operate and perform. Got rid of a few things, but nothing critical to public safety, nothing critical to operations as a whole. One of the goals the interim city managers had is the M files, record keeping. We're part of that. We have M files for our dispatch center and our records division, where all the warrants are stored, basically an electronic file cabinet where they can reach out and get those warrants. We put that in the police budget. We were able to add that into the police budget, so we'll be part of M files and get that up and rolling. Also too, we added some 10,000, I think, for tires, because that's no longer covered in the shop fees. Very random, but it's outside repairs to motor vehicles, but we were able to add that in. One thing I am requesting a carryover from last year's budget is 50,000 for the staffing study. That did not get done. We've been working on it. I have 2 proposals waiting on another proposal to come in. I just don't think we're going to get invoiced before the June 30th deadline. So I'm requesting that 50,000 be carried over so we can continue with that staffing study as well. That is my notes for that part of the operating budget. Any questions on that?
Comments or questions from the commission?
Can I, how or does I know when we talked about the staffing study last year, a lot of it was comparing, demand within the calls for service and everything else. How does that, or does it interact with the market-based study that we'll be doing, or would be doing as a city overall, or do they interact at all?
Mayor, Commissioner Dean, I think they will interface.
Okay.
Ours is going to be a large part. We're a lot of 53 FTE for sworn officers. So that's officers on the street. Now that's top to bottom as well. What it'll really look at is that calls for service, and do we have the proper response for as many officers that should be going? And then it'll also look at resources for times of when stuff is happening. So from usually 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. is high traffic for us, high call load. Do we have the right resources out at that time? So we'll be looking at that. Plus, do we have is 53 the right number?
Yeah, and Mayor, the broader study will look at the whole matrix and then compare on some geographical area that we would consider a market, where we're at relative to the market and COLA and benefits.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, I want to say thank you to, I believe it's Farah who does your budget, and it is every year, the level of detail is magnificent. It's very easy to go through, so thank you for providing all the breakdown information you always do.
Mayor, Commission, I know Farah's listening, I think she is, but she does a wonderful job. And when we were hit with that budget constraint, before I even made it back to the office after an email was sent, she had sat down with my captain and they already started penciling in what we can do. And amazing team I have over there.
Yes, please.
So, the 53 is the number that we think now we should be personed at in terms of officers.
53 is what we have currently.
That's what we have currently. And so presumptively the study will say or show in some fashion, no, that's high or low or right, Margaret.
Correct.
How many, how many vacancies do we still have?
Part of it, 6 openings. I have 2 currently in the background process. March, end of February, I was down to these 2 that are in the background process. I was down to 1 opening, so we're getting there. I had a couple just leave. They were lateral officers that came here and went back to where they came from. So I have testing. We're currently open. The application process is currently open. We test June 26th. We have a slew of applications right now. One thing too is if I do hire a person with no police experience, they're not a lateral officer, no law enforcement experience from somewhere else, I have to get them into the academy. The academy runs 3 times a year, September, January, and April. In order to get that 3-month training, I basically have to make reservations at the academy. I have reservations for 3 officers up until the end of 2024. I didn't think I'd be in the position I am, that I need to have 5, but we have people on the waiting list as well, so.
So I need to re-ask my question. 53 is what you're funded for. But
Yes.
you do not have 53.
No, sir.
Okay, you're short 6 at this point in time.
Correct.
All right, that helps clarify. Thanks very much.
You bet.
Any others?
Mr. Mayor,
Please.
couple, I think, actually 3. Couple years ago, police department included in its budget a program, I think, called Digiticket.
Yep.
And at the time it was moved to courts.
Municipal court, yep,
That's-
still there.
Yeah, and I recall seeing that in the budget. Is that an appropriate place for it to be, or would it be better in the police department, or?
Mayor, Commissioner Logan, I'll let Nikki answer that. if she
And
wants.
if it's better to answer that?
Do you want to wait till we
Yeah,
come to
sure.
mine? That,
Yeah,
yeah,
just ask the question.
yeah, and then I can kind of go into the story.
If I may add on the Digiticket process, that fee has been significantly reduced yearly, which is a good thing. It went from low 20,000 a year, and now we're sitting at about 5,000 a year. So we're doing very good there. And part of that is we have to buy the hardware. It's not a lease option, so.
Okay, thank you. So another question I had intended to ask the other day, I think it was in City County, but I didn't take the opportunity, relative to the update in the CAD RMS. And this kind of relates to fire. I can't like just pin it on police here. It's, sorry.
Thank you.
But so one of the weaknesses in the existing CAD RMS, I would say, and this occurred when I think we transitioned to Logisys many years ago,
Full 3.
is the capturing of fire department response times. Just to give you a little history lesson, when I first started, we had status heads on the radios. So you jump in the radio, push the button, that would capture that particular piece of the response time. And then when you arrive, you push a button and so on. And it was all sort of radio based. But when we went to Logisys, we lost that and it became this communication between fire and dispatch. Okay, fire or dispatch were on scene, and sometimes that may not always be captured instantaneously and might be missed in the flow of things. So is this update or upgrade going to in any way help that?
Mayor, Commissioner Logan. Yes, I believe so. So I know exactly what you're talking about. It's the call for service. So when it initially comes out to the dispatcher, it's logged. You called in at noon. They dispatch whatever resource that needs to be in it. Might not be fire department at the time. However, They get down there and they say, now it's a medical or something, and it might be 10 minutes into the call. Well, now they page out fire department. They get there and say the response is only 3 minutes. However, according to the CAD, the call came out at noon. Now you're showing 10 minutes plus 3, there it's 12:13. So it's showing their response from initial call would be 13 minutes, which wouldn't be correct. The issues we're having with our current CAD is you have to mine for that information. It's not readily available because I don't think that system was necessarily built for the stats and for those call times, especially for the 23 agencies that dispatch serves. So I believe with the new system and the consultant's going to meet with fire, the consultant's going to meet with all these agencies as well to hopefully nail that down. And if fire needs to look at their times, here it is.
Cool, thank you. And the last question, could you just, I don't think I've ever taken the opportunity to ask the question, but just give kind of an overview of overtime and how you use it, you know, how it works in your department.
So overtime in our department is, say an officer has, it's their Friday, because they do 4/10s and it's their Friday. They need to have those reports in because they're gonna have 3 days off. Those reports are important not only for the courts, but for the attorneys. So they need to have all that paperwork in so they know what the cases are going to do. So there's a chance they're gonna save for 2-3 hours because they couldn't catch up on their reports from that. Anytime we have a call out, it's gonna be overtime. Court, in the contract, where if they have court, they're off at 6 in the morning, but court doesn't start till 8. They will have overtime. They'll have a 3-hour overtime that they get for that. During our extra work, they get paid a minimum of 3 hours overtime for that at their overtime rate. Extra work is charged out at $60 an hour. Overtime to cover shifts. If we have shift shortages, someone calls in sick, they have the opportunity to do overtime or comp. I couldn't give you a stat whether they take overtime or comp usually, but that's usually our overtime costs there.
And did I hear you correctly? Are they 4/10s?
Correct.
So an average week is roughly 40 hours.
Yep.
Plus overtime, is there an average to that?
Oh, an average overtime for an officer. Without having the numbers in front of me, I would say the average overtime for shift 2 officer, which is 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. would be more because of that's the bigger call load. They would have to stay longer to get reports done. For some of our graveyard folks that get off at 6 in the morning and it wasn't a busy night, we have less overtime on that shift. So it's definitely shift dependent.
Thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions for Chief Petty? Please continue.
You bet. So that was the operating cost for the police is what I had there. And then moving forward, we just talked about staffing, currently 6 officers down. I talked about doing the carryover of the staffing study. One thing we're going to be looking at next year is a court officer, also known as a bailiff. I would like to, this would be a new FTE, the courts, Nikki and her department, Judge Peterson requesting, and by state law, if the judge is requesting an officer, the chief of police will provide one from their department. So what I would like to do, it can be a fully sworn officer or it can be a reserve officer. One thing I'm going to look at is doing requesting a new FTE, and it'll be a non-sworn, which we'll have as a reserve officer. And that's for the courts over there. And we'll have to work with the courts as far as scheduling, stuff like that. But I'm guessing it'll be a Monday through Friday during court hours is what they're looking at over there. And I gave the CAD RMS update earlier. I think the last thing that I have would just be to go over some of our capital requests.
Here's the list we passed out to the commission last time. And so, Mayor, we're reviewing the capital requests of the general fund. And I think after we've heard all the departments, then we'll bring that back to you for some direction on our cement.
Would you like me to go over that? Okay. So the 4 items that I'm requesting in our capital outlays, the very typical one that you see every year is our patrol vehicles, requesting 4. Our vehicles run 24/7. Officers share vehicles. Person gets off shift, they jump in the same vehicle and go. These vehicles get a lot of use, so we want to make sure that we're up on our vehicles. We have switched to the hybrid, which they do cost a little bit more, but they've proven to be excellent vehicles. Lieutenant Vander did an article not too long ago on the gas consumption, and not that he could provide numbers, but it was less on those vehicles. One thing I'm requesting is the replacement of the handguns. Last time we got handguns was 2000, I believe it was 2013. They have a 3 to 5 year life cycle. This would be the fifth generation Glock. So their life cycle is 3 to 5 years or 30,000 rounds. Maybe some of the SWAT guys have put 30,000 rounds in training through their pistols, but we are 8, 9 years out on that. So if it doesn't happen this next year, it'll definitely have to happen the following year. The Faro 3D laser scanner investigation tool. I put this in every year. Chief McGee, Chief Hagan have told me consistently no, so I'm used to no on that. But this tool is used, we have right now what we use for to investigate crashes on the highway, and this is serious bodily injury or death, it's called a total station, and it's what surveyors use. This here does it in less than half the time, and what it produces is like a Google map. The reason we use these tools is for evidentiary value. We have to go tell the story of what happened to court, and we have to present this. So by us being able to capture what it really looked like out there at the time is huge for us. And with the total station, what you do is you take points for miles and miles, and I've been out there for hours doing points, and then you bring it back to recreate it. Another thing with that Faro, you can also use it inside a residence if you have a crime inside the residence. It takes pictures and it takes way less time, and it's obviously with technology, everything's each year technology keeps getting better. My last request there for the drone, 2 instances to where a drone is very helpful. I may have talked about the tragedy we had over near Capitol High, that young student over there. We used MHP to come in and do the drone work. Because of the situation, because of the location, we were going to shoot that with the total station. It would have taken at least 3 hours to do that. That was right in the neighborhood. He came in with a drone. It took almost a half hour. We got the evidentiary value of what we needed, and then we just had a pedestrian hit Broadway and Holback on Monday. We asked MHP to come out with the drone because that's serious bodily injury, even though non-life-threatening injuries were sustained. But we had MHP come because Broadway's a thoroughfare and we didn't want to have traffic down. They were done in 20 minutes with that total station, at least 2 hours on that. So it's just one of those things that we're at end of life with that total station. And we're county, they've been gracious enough to let us use the Faro on incidents that we have, and then the drone MHP has, but we need to have our own. We can't keep asking. We need to move forward with this. So those are my 4 requests this year.
How much are one of those? I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Please go.
How much are one of
The
those?
price.
Oh, the drone,
Yeah.
Mayor, it's $42,201.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Chief Petty. Is it, if I'm hearing you correctly, would you need both of those items? Or it sounds like the drone can do what the one does. Are they not necessarily interchangeable? But do they do the same thing? And if no, which would be the priority?
Priority would be the drone because most of our stuff is outside. Absolutely. Feral, we can't really do the drone inside for crime scenes. So that Farrell would be good for that. But if I definitely had to put a priority on it, is that drone, just the work it does, the camera quality, everything that it does, and the quickness of getting people in and out of there and not boggling up traffic or having a crime scene near the high school. Definitely the drone.
Any other comments?
I have no idea what feral. I don't even know how to spell
Fair.
it. So it's almost like an acronym to me right now.
Mayor, Commissioner Fever, Faro, it's a company, Faro. It's basically a scanner that you put in the middle of the room, and it just takes pictures of the room. It spins around, takes pictures, and what it produces is, the production is like Google Maps, but of the room. So when I take that and I import it into the computer, I can go in there and start moving around the room like I was there. A lot of it for crime scenes is where the crime occurred, blood spatter, stuff like that, placement, trajectory, and it's able to capture all that in real time. So if I have the total station, I go in there, and I start shooting points, I have to recreate that. Now I can make it 3D, but it's better quality 2D. If I have the Faro, I can set it right here, it'll show all of us, it'll show it real time. Better production.
So I see that there's a general capital fund sheet going around, which actually adds it on there. I don't think I have a copy of that.
Actually,
I
it was in the book, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think we got it
Last meeting.
last meeting, so it's
We
probably.
can get you another copy.
Paperwork there.
You might want to. I'll just take the sheet.
Yeah, no,
He has no use for it. Thank you.
I already had mine listed out, so we're good.
Did I give you my copy, chief?
Would you like one?
I can get another.
Yeah. Commissioner Fever, will you have your copy?
Okay. Thanks, Chief. Any other comments for the chief? Chief, are you done?
I'm done.
Any other final comments for the chief?
Except one question, for those two items, do you know what their lifespan is
For the
for the
drone,
drone and Faro?
I know the county purchased their Faro at least 8 to 10 years ago. And what I've seen technology wise and with the crash program, not much has changed. The drone, I don't have a lifespan on, but I can get that.
Thanks.
You bet.
Please.
So to make sure that I'm still on track, these are not in the budget now. These are things that will be maybe slide into the budget as we go forward. And choices will have to be made because we can't afford all $2.6 million, whatever it is down at the bottom. So am I right on that?
Mayor, Commissioner, yes.
Okay. Thank you, chief.
Thank you.
Appreciate your presentation.
Or Ms. Mayor, can I ask the manager a question?
Yeah,
So
sure.
Is it fair to say that, so these items, thinking back to my old days, this would be the 440 type items?
Yes, and Commissioner, Mayor, it would also be in the cash that you want to use.
Thank you.
Okay, hats. These ballot bus system.
What? I think it's me.
Municipal court. I apologize.
Mayor, Commissioner.
Municipal court.
So my budget is much more simple following Chief Petty. I don't have any of the fun things to talk about. My budget has not changed much, basically at all from last year, other than the one budget constraint out of my contracts line. And that's where the page of, is it page 9? I don't have page numbers on mine, so. Okay,
Sure.
We're there? So the big change was the only change was the budget constraint. And that was in reference to the question that Commissioner Logan asked previously. And I can describe it real quickly. DigiTicket is the electronic system that the court and the officers use to print out tickets. It's a system in the patrol officer's car. They actually have a printer and it's a scanner type device and it prints out a digital ticket. And then we download, the officers download that either in the mornings or in the middle of the night. And then the clerk that goes in processes the downloads and then they're printed out. So we print out a sheet of paper. It's an electronic system. There's it eliminates the handwritten tickets that officers still can write handwritten tickets if there's a problem with their system and or if there's a situation where they can't use their system. But otherwise, the DigiTicket makes everything super streamlined. You're not trying to figure out officers' handwriting. The officers don't have to try and look up a statute in a little booklet. It's all there in the program. So anyway, and it came to the court's budget, I think 2 budget cycles ago, because of some budget constraints that HPD had. They asked if we could take it over. And then, so now we've gotten to today and Jason Zander, Officer Zander and I have been working with DigiTicket. We're no longer going to lease the printers. We're buying them. And that kind of eliminates a big chunk of the money. So going forward, I'm going to carry what they consider the licensing contract for the system. And then if there's other things that need to be purchased, I think we'll kind of work that out as we go along this next year. But I have the money now in my budget for this coming year to pay for the licensing part of it. So we're good. And I don't have any capital to ask for, so it's a pretty simple budget. If anybody has any questions. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Comments or questions for Chris?
Only that when I walked into the room, they introduced herself as one of my former students. And then she took a guess at the year.
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty neat, you know, I
Yeah,
have a
that
lot of
is.
former students, I've just forgotten so darn many, and there's my apologies. 1978,
A few years ago.
Cool.
yeah.
All right, and I think thank you. You're done.
I think I'm done. And I would like to thank Chief Petty too for being willing to provide us with a bailiff, even though it's in statute. It is a budget stress on you, but I think it'll be really helpful for our court as things change in society and as we go along. I think it's important that the judge has that and the people in the courtroom have that feeling of safety that a bailiff will provide.
So one thing we talked about, and this isn't necessarily a concern for this budget, but especially when we're talking about what the 440 looks like a few years from now. We discussed when the renovation was happening in the courtroom that the likelihood of us needing a second courtroom sometime in the near-ish future would likely be coming. Do you all have like a sense of when that decision might have to be considered? And I guess, is there planning that we can start doing now? Just so it's not, so we're not in a situation where we were last time where we were scrambling to fully fund a court renovation.
Right, and find a spot.
Yeah.
Mayor, Commissioner Dean, it's an ongoing discussion with all the entities, with HPD, with the finance department, with pretrial, all the entities that are involved in that. As far as the timeline, the judge would like to add, Judge Peterson would like to add a drug and alcohol court. So if that would be maybe a small step in adding an additional part-time judge in that process of eventually adding a full-time judge. sooner than later would be better. And we're looking to find a grant writer for the grants that would be required to start that court. So we are working on the process. I would say maybe we're 3 to 5 years out. But I guess.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah, and just like that, we'll be talking about this next week at your budget meeting, but with the community facilities within the city. The challenges that we have been facing with the Law and Justice Center, the county's agreed to recreate the building board, which we had at one point in time and didn't need it because of this particular building. But I think because of the issues, whether it's space for an additional court or whether it's improving the deficiencies in the building, I think that between the city and the county, we ought to start meeting about once a quarter again to try to work our way through these issues.
please.
So could you just, Mr. Burton, just briefly describe that board, who's it comprised of?
Briefly, it's in the past, it has had elected officials from the county and the city, chief administrative officer, the city manager, to look at the capital plans, look at the future plans, look at the rent rates, all of that, that essentially allows us to maintain our buildings on a purposeful, dedicated basis.
Thank you.
And I skipped a topic and I want to go back to it. So Chief Campbell, forgive me, we'll get to you. But we will look at the city clerk and commission. Madam Clerk, are you there? Well, thanks, Chief.
I have Denise.
You have the floor.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I think this is just an update from our last meeting where I had requested that we consider those additional items be re-added to the budget. And it's my understanding that Director Danielson has since added those items. They should be updated in your packet.
Yes, Mayor, they are added in, and if I may, just very briefly, we also had some follow-up on the health insurance levy, and we're still doing a little work on that, finding the original base, which goes back to about 2000. Like that, if it's okay, defer that until the next budget meeting, so that we can brief the commission on the status of the health insurance levy. And then also we notified the commission that the victim services grant came in around 10,000 less, and so we've adjusted the budget to respond to that as well.
Yes, thank you, City Manager, Mayor, Commissioners. So what we did, the discussion with the items that are in the city clerk's budget, we included those items that she's asked for her records program to move forward.
Mhm.
And the discussion was to have reserves paid for the city manager recruitment. And that is how that's being reflected in the general fund right now, is for the reserves in the general fund to pay for the city manager recruitment, and about $50,000 item that would come out of reserves. And in addition, another 10,000 out of reserves to pay for the shortfall in the grant to pay for the victim services program.
So just, Mayor, working our way toward draft budget that will be considered by the governing body across the whole. We'll be able to summarize those changes in this room and in our presentation when we're considering the budget, so that you'll know where we started and where we ended up.
So we see revised sheets of all the spreadsheets will be amended or adjusted as we go forward.
They will be, and we'll be able to point out and show you why it is what it is when we're done.
Any other comments? Yes. Director Dennis.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. So when we come to the June 6th hearing meeting, we will have a full budget book for the commission to review that will have those revisions and a summary of changes.
Can I ask a question about the 50,000 that'll come from reserves? That included the annual review, contracted services or whatever that looks like as well, right?
Mr. Mayor, Commissioner Dean, when I did initial outreach at your direction for a vague cost estimate from several consultants, 25,000 was about average for a recruitment cost. When we added in additional services like the staff survey or as part of that contract, the eval at the 6-month and 1-year mark for the city manager, the rough estimate was about another $25,000. So yes.
So I guess after this year, that's when we would roll it into our regular budget. Not one from reserves. Ideally.
Excuse me, Mayor, thank you.
Yes.
So that it would just be a salary line item for and operating costs going forward. But for the initial recruitment and all of that, because it really technically is hopefully not an ongoing cost for the city, that it'll just come out of one-time reserves to pay for that, and then ongoing operating costs.
Are you done? Madam Clerk?
Yes, as far as the clerk and the commission budget, yes. Mr. Mayor.
Any comments or questions for clerk? Ma'am? Oh, please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just add one more thing. So the Helena Citizens Council I had submitted their budget proposal, just like all other departments. And I had visited with their admin, Peggy Benkelman, and discussed why there were changes to their initial submittal, primarily because each of the departments had to go through some budget adjustments and constraints to have a balanced budget. And so I went through that with her, and she seemed like everything was fine the way it was finally presented to her. So I'm not sure if she took that back to the HCC board or not, but she was happy with the final budget that I provided to her.
Are they going to be presenting or?
Normally what the HCC does is they present their budget with their transmittal letter to the commission.
All right. Chief Campbell. You have the floor.
Thanks, sir.
Page 29.
Yes, page 29 of the packet is the fire department budget.
This one?
No, sir. We'll touch on that briefly. So my intention is to describe briefly some accomplishments that are reflective of the current budget year that we've been working through. Discuss some of the next year goals that are supported in the budget document that you have. Touch on our capital and answer any questions that you may have. Let's start by thanking Manager Burton and Director Danielson and my admin coordinator Stephanie Crick for helping me, as this is my first budget year as the fire chief, and it takes a lot of patience and training to bring a director up to the ability to try and wrap our heads around what's happening. So thank you very much. From the accomplishments from the last year, COVID obviously had some drastic impacts on the cost to do business as well as some of our operational practices. So coming out of that, it'll be nice to see a more normalized, responsive budget that's reflective of non-pandemic times. We were still, however, able to complete a master plan review of the fire department, and that is that final document that you have in hard copy in front of you. We still had over 7,000 participant hours in training for all department members over year to date, so for the fiscal year. So it's good to continue to meet training benchmarks for preparation of emergency response and career development and progression in compliance with our union contract. We've transitioned to utilizing a layered in element of training. We're utilizing accredited certifications through IFSAC and Pro Board. Those are fire service training accredited agencies. That lends some credence to our training program and allows us to make sure we have more similar than different training between one shift and the next, normalizing operations department-wide. We replaced a retired deputy fire marshal and added a fire inspector. So we're seeing enhancements to what our prevention division is capable of doing, taking on, and the timeliness at which they can visit commercial occupancies within the city. We saw station repairs and security projects. And as far as major incidents go, I don't want to go into too many details, but one of the primary ones was our mutual aid response to Denver. That was a unique circumstance for sure, but it was also not an incident type that the city of Helena had previously spent a lot of energy and time into being prepared for those responses at a Montana mutual aid level. I think it was the right thing to do twofold. One being there's a community in crisis and we have the ability to help them. The other is developing a firsthand experience of our staff here better prepares us to deal with the bad day that may eventually happen to us as well. So those are kind of the highlights of our accomplishments from the last year. Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, if you have any questions.
Comments or questions from the commission for the chief?
Do you have more?
No, sir, I was gonna move into our next year's goals if you're ready. So the budget as we have here, obviously the constraints are a component that we needed to figure out as compared to previous budget years. And fire department is in support of a balanced budget, and we're eager to work through that process to make sure that we're meeting city initiative level goals. The goals internally for our organization that are supported in this budget plan utilize our master plan to set priorities, objectives, and work plan items. So we're in discussions around developing work group and falling in line with the other capital plans and the sequence and order of operations as it relates to overall city objectives. This budget does bring into clear focus the need to explore alternate funding sources that will generate fire dedicated revenues, including creating a strategic plan to address those long-term priorities of additional station, training facility, and staff. One of the other primary goals we have within this budget is to finalize a contract and fund annual firefighter physicals for the entire organization. That was one of our top priorities. It was a recommendation through the master plan presentation you were provided by our consultant group, and it puts us in better alignment with national industry standards as well as statewide practices for firefighter health and safety. Some of our prevention division goals: develop training plan for fire prevention investigation personnel to address their individual professional development and overall division improvement. Increase the frequency of our commercial occupancy inspections. Create a workspace to accommodate FPIB staffing levels. Our inspector is currently using the Assistant Chief of Training's office because that's a vacant position. When we're able to fill that position, we will not have space for all our administrative staff. So this budget supports a work project to add some office space for that. Improve public outreach and education in the context of wildfire protection and evacuation routes. I think you're seeing information relative to that goal already through our partnership with the public information officer. Then some of the goals around our training division, strategic plan for funding and constructing a training facility, as well as the creation of individualized training plans for all members for professional development and long-term departmental outcomes. Mr. Mayor, Commissioner, is there any questions relative to the goals as they relate to this?
Comments or questions from the commission?
I have just the way these spreadsheets come out. The vacancy adjustments, mean that a position was not filled, and that was a savings or a what?
But what we're projecting through the vacancy savings, Mayor and Commissioner, is that it's not gonna be 100% staff from the time you approve the budget through the end of the year. And so we're projecting 3.75% vacancy savings throughout the next fiscal year.
This is the whole city, not the fire department.
It's the whole city.
So when there's a 40,000 vacancy savings, that's, what is that, third of the employees? Trying to put it into my brain, I can see a much larger, like 360 grand in the police department. So you're anticipating not filling all those 6 positions.
Well, Mayor, we're planning on filling them, but we're gonna have to manage when we hire and all of that. And so when in the future, there's a vacancy to be filled, it's first going to be vetted by the personnel department and the finance department. So that we can track this projection throughout.
So it's a holistic view, as like looking at the entire city budget. And so one department, you may assume a vacancy savings there of say 40 grand in the fire department, but that may not actually occur in the fire department. And so that savings could happen in some other position of the city.
Your Commissioner, that's correct.
And one other thing, I don't recall budget constraints being discussed last time. So there must have been some decision made this year before now, but maybe before you were here.
You know, it was made, Mayor, it was made for this budget.
For just this budget. And so you did, when people said, when folks said we have, the budget constraint is X, that was, they were told to cut the budget back by that constraint. Is that what we're talking about here?
Yes. When I showed up,
Okay, you're the guy. All right.
the budget last year had a 1.8 million structural imbalance. Regardless of new requests, that was the first issue that we had to deal with. And so one of the tools that I think we can manage and work our way through to the balanced budget at the end of the year is this constraint. But I didn't want to come forward with another structural imbalance budget. And so we have to start from 1.8 million in the hole.
Okay, well, I think that's very admirable. Kind of a different way of looking at how I might have prepared, but I just wouldn't have mentioned budget which constraints. I would just have presented the budget, but they've been applied, if not purposely understood. Am I making sense here? So this is interesting that you're actually announcing in advance that folks wanted more and they got less, maybe not a lot less, but some less, and that's embedded in this budget. Okay, this is good. All right.
It is, and I just really believe that by more formalizing the onboarding and recruitment process with the city having to check its way through both personnel and finance before the decisions made to proceed, that gives us the ability to actually manage this constraint.
Please continue, Chief.
Thank you, sir.
Oh,
Sorry, relative to goals, Chief, I just gotta say, I'm jacked up. Seeing what I'm seeing here recently in terms of education and all of plans has done tremendous amount of work in terms of skill mitigation for the area. And I think sort of for me, the missing piece kind of has been the outreach to the public. As chief, that was a struggle that I had trying to figure out relative to the budget that we have, how to connect with the public about what their responsibility is, what evacuation means. When such fire that has happened to other communities happens here. And, you know, things that they can just easily do around their homes and with the families in terms of preparation for wildfire. So it's like a kid at Christmas when I saw that video come out the other day. It's a great start. You know, I guess in terms of goals, this is just one commissioner's thought, but the goals relative to the future is that particular division of the fire department. Roll that. Yes. I would say, I mean, relative to your overall staffing in the prevention bureau, that's where it was when I started in '96. And clearly there's soapbox there, sorry. The community has grown a lot. And since then, even the wildfire problem has significantly changed with our climate and with insect mortality and those sorts of things. And so, and as was pointed out in the master plan, wildland fire potential is the biggest risk we've got. And so certainly is it's on be supportive of running that division and their ability to educate. Thank you for
Any other comments for,
I'll get out myself.
well, that's cool. Thank you. Any other comments for Chief Campbell?
Is this budget, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, relates to our capital? We have a number of rollover projects that have previously been funded, but due to supply chain issues, continue to be in the waiting list for us. Namely, our aerial apparatus replacement. That'll also create the surplus of the old apparatus, which has been the finances of that will go back to the debt services of the new apparatus. We have a command vehicle and a battalion chief vehicle that we're waiting on, as well as confined space communication systems support our mission to provide those rescue services for OSHA compliance for our water and public works facilities. Additionally, thermal imaging cameras have been purchased, and we're hoping to see those before the end of the fiscal year, but that may be a rollover as well. The capital outlay for the fire department in the next fiscal year is a little leaner, and that's intentional because of our well-supported capital outlay from the city over previous years. We've got good apparatus, we have good equipment, and we're in the right place to be able to use what we have. Additionally, we do not have the station space to house any additional equipment, so it would not be prudent to add layers that we can't holistically approach in terms of the ability to bring that equipment inside. On our capital outlay, again, talking about the station office space, the truck one equipment project is to make sure that new apparatus meets the NFPA standard for quints, to have the desired tools, equipment, hose length and diameters that are on it. Handheld radios, believe it or not, just the handheld radio is a pretty darn expensive piece of equipment and now meets the capital threshold for expenses. We've included in our budget grants that we've applied for, even though we haven't been awarded yet, but just to be informative about our efforts to utilize grant funds. One of which is the Type 3 wildland apparatus. Currently we have 2 Type 6s. The principal differences are overall size, water, and pump capacity. We believe a Type 3 would better diversify our wildland firefighting response and improve our capacity to provide structured protection in a wildland urban interface configuration. Additionally, 2 breathing air compressors. We only have 1 right now, requiring all of our breathing air cylinders be transferred to a single station to be filled. This would put 1 in each and replace the aged one at our station 2. And then lastly, on the grant side, our fire prevention education grant, in order to support the materials needed to utilize prevention staff to do public outreach, inclusive of our October annual Fire Prevention Week, and that's a lot of outreach into the school, second grade level outreach for fire prevention education. Mr. Mayor, that's the conclusion of my report of the budget.
Thank you, Chief. Comments or questions of the chief? Please, go ahead.
So similar to the question that I have, Chief Petty, relative to your overtime, can you just give us a brief overview on that?
Yes, sir.
So that management.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioner Logan, our overtime, the lion's share of our overtime comes from either sick or injured firefighters or their families. Some overtime utilization does occur to support special projects. A recent example being, we had a firefighter retire. We didn't have a training chief hired. That vacancy has persisted. And we provided a special assignment to one of our lieutenants to take on a month's worth of transfer from his regular shift to being on days to train that new firefighter so we could bring him on board. But again, the lion's share of the overtime is sourced to sick, injured firefighters and firefighter families. So really, any time a firefighter is sick or injured, it causes an overtime parameter for us, and that's where our expenses come. I've been in discussion with Manager Burton on the management of that. It was been on my radar significantly since becoming interim chief and now fire chief. And I've sort of stepped back through the last few years, and we've been out of budget in overtime, and I would say a severe posture. And those have aligned with COVID. We were back in budget. The most recent year we were on budget with overtime was prior to COVID. So moving into hopefully the termination of COVID affecting our day-to-day operations, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to maintain our current staffing model and keep a very close eye on the implications of overtime so that we can more appropriately conclude our budget year, knowing that we fairly predict where we're going to land. Did that answer your question, Commissioner Wilton?
Yes, sir. Thank you. And one final question on the page 36, the fire safety levy. This is probably more general question than maybe specific. My understanding from the passage of the levy in July of 2018, roughly 2/3 of that was to go for the hiring of additional personnel, and then the balance of that, I don't think it was set in stone, was for capital. Now, let's say that was 300,000 annually. Where do we see that? How that's allocated or spent or on these particular pages? Yes.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioner Logan, if I could ask for Director Danielson's assistance in figuring out how this is laid out for your explanation.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioner. So
I thought you said first.
it's a little bit difficult to see because in prior years, we had fire service revenues going into Fund 260, which is that fire levy fund. And this year I ended that practice where those monies are going directly to the general fund where they belong. I think that the reason, the mechanism for sending those fire service charges to Fund 260 is to try to track the revenue better from the fire department, because we don't, it's just an accounting structure. So it's hard to tell because what it is just a transfer out to the general fund. And that's how it's reflected on the Fund 260 as a transfer out to the general fund. And so in the past, that transfer included some of those fire service revenues over the general fund. I can, for the next meeting, map out exactly how much of the levy dollars have been sent to the general fund to support the firefighters in the last few years.
Yeah, that would be cool. Thank you. So, we have a sense of from these departments, police, parks, and so on, the capital needs that they have. Fire used to be part of that 440. And then the levy enabled them, called to detach from that, what amounted to be an annual wrestling match. Because I remember always those police vehicles, you know, and so we have to compete for that. And with the levy no longer in that mix. So it would be good to see how that money is being managed.
Yeah, and thank you, Commissioner and Mayor. I have worked closely with the fire department to calculate what that transfer is going to be to support the 6 firefighters in the general fund. It includes, their salaries and wages in addition to their operating costs that go with that. And then they provide that information to me, and then we work together to determine what that transfer is. But since that levy, the fire department has been able to manage their capital requests out of that fire levy fund.
Cool.
If I may add one thing to that, please, Mr. Mayor, Commissioner Logan. This is also the FY22 is also the first fiscal year that we haven't seen a portion of those wages covered by the SAFER grant that those firefighters were hired under. So from year to year, if you track it backwards, it has an anomalous appearance because that grant actually implicated some of those final figures.
That grant is expired.
Yes, sir.
Chief, thank you. I just want to be clear. So on the items that are included in here that you've applied for grants for, like the 2-air compressor, fire prevention and education materials, and then the wildland track. If you don't get the grants, are you still requesting those items, or just if we get the grants?
They're grant dependent, and our anticipation is that type 3 will replace one of our type 6, and the surplus of that type 6 will meet the match fund requirements of the grants. It should be a straight wash to the
Thanks.
Any other comments from Chief Campbell? Thank you, Chief. Appreciate your presentation.
Thanks.
Now move on to parks. Attorney Ray. Yeah.
Mayor Commission, Trustee Pezzo, Parks Director. I have much of my staff here tonight, my division folks to help out. As you know, I'm going to be transitioning out of Parks Director position, so I wanted to make sure that they're involved in all these budget discussions. I'm going to go through our
Page 39, right?
page 51 is the start of what we have on the schedule. We start with open space and trails. So the Parks Department is comprised of multiple different divisions, although we work cohesively as a team. We'll start out with page 51 is open space and trails. And I have Brad Langsapper, who's our open space manager. And I'm just going to give some high level information. We have about 2,000 acres.
No, mine was just all over the place.
Sorry. We have about 2,000 acres of open space lands that we manage. Some of our notable accomplishments from last year include several recreation trails projects, trail maintenance, including the accessible trail that is almost complete on Mount Helena, and forest fuels projects as well. And I'll turn it over to Brad, and he can talk a little bit about some of our forest fuels projects and acreage that we completed last year.
Mayor, Commissioners, last year we completed about 280 acres of forest fuel work with several different grants. And this year we won't quite reach that pace. Annually, to maintain what we've accomplished in our open space, we need to treat about 170 acres a And so where our program's at now, we've done a lot of the initial treatments. We cycle into a maintenance treatment about every 10 years. So with 1,700 acres forested, that's about 170 acres a year. And that cost annually is about $160,000. It's been supported primarily in my time here with the acquisition of grants, and over $2 million in the last 14 years or so. And again, to maintain this level of forest management, we're gonna have to put about 160,000.
We have for next year's future goals and future items, we're going to be pursuing additional grant funding for forest fuels. And we are also proposing to increase our assessment. So the open space maintenance district is an assessment fund. We're specifically going to propose an increase to the impervious surface rate to increase fund revenues approximately 80,000 annually. Impervious areas of the developed part of a lot or parcel, impermeable to stormwater infiltration. That's how the impervious surface is defined. In the impervious areas that are built in the city, there is a need of offset, and city open space land does that. Our open space lands have grown significantly in the last 10 years by approximately 20%. And our use on open lands continues to grow, as well as the need for infrastructure to support the increased use. While our staff is able to, like Brad mentioned, leverage significant grant fundings for fuels reduction, forest health and recreation projects, additional staffing has been brought on to maintain basic maintenance and operations. That's all I have on open space and trails. Do you guys have any questions?
Comments
On
or
that
questions for Director Pedrosa? Please go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, thank you, Director Pinozo. I'm not sure if this is the right question, if it belongs in this part of the presentation. I was looking for trails etiquette. Is that in here this year? Am I looking in the wrong space?
As a specific line item.
Or is it somewhere in there? Because I've gotten a lot of outreach from community members about that project, and people really liked it, and I was looking to see where it was in the budget, and I'm just not sure if I'm looking in the right place or where it is.
Mayor, Commissioner Reed, so this year we focused our trail maintenance program on hard maintenance, so on the ground maintenance. Last year, we put a lot of funding into the trail etiquette program. We did not put funding into that this year. All of our trail maintenance work is on the ground, actual maintenance of the trails.
Any other comments or questions for Director Pedrosa or her team?
A question on the trails maintenance piece. How much of that do we staff out, and how much of that
Mayor, Commissioner Dean, so this year we are contracting out $35,000 worth of trail maintenance work. And the city staff effort that went into that was the initial analysis of the system to determine which trails needed to be maintained. We're also combining that with funds that were raised by volunteers. And so that actual trail maintenance contract is around $49,000 for this year.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, if I might, I'm not sure which is the better person to answer. Just a quick follow-up on trail maintenance. We received an email some time ago, I believe, talking about a backlog of trail maintenance. How far does this go in addressing that? What is our plan? I think it's like a 3 to 4 year backlog, if I remember it correctly. And in this year's budget, how far are we getting towards addressing that backlog?
Mayor, Commissioner Reed, so we're addressing that backlog aggressively this year. And that's why we focused our efforts on the ground. So we took and basically all the trails that needed major maintenance, which is rebuilding the prism, we're accomplishing that this year. We prioritized those trails that needed that work. So in essence, we're accomplishing the majority of that backlog in 1 year. To do that, we have trails that were in good condition that simply aren't in this year's maintenance program. So rather than spread our maintenance over the whole 40 miles of trails we have, we focused on the trails that were most in need.
Any others?
Mr. Mayor, need a little more articulation, please. Grants from whom? For what? I mean, you know what? I can't find grants in here anywhere. It says revenue from this grant, that grant, the other grant. And that's question number one. Two, being a major trail user myself, 48,000 doesn't look to me like it would cover trail maintenance. If you need more, you should ask for more. And I would be very amenable to that. And then how you would expend that would be very useful. Somewhere along the line, I'm going to be asking for money for trail, more money for trail maintenance. So as you start thinking about the budget going forward, you might think that this is one division of maybe more who are interested in our trails. I get the etiquette part, although there seems to be kind of a growing group of folks that they bring their mutt bins with them, but they just don't take them back out with them. I mean, little piles of mutt bins off the trails. But I don't know. I've taken a bunch of pictures of them. Thought I'd show them up on Facebook, and then decided, oh, that's, you know, maybe that's more than I need to do. I just make myself annoying. But that's part of trail maintenance too. It's just an issue. So some articulation of grants, where they come from, and what their degree is, and how they are expended in terms of the trail maintenance would be very useful.
Mayor, Commissioner, we receive grants for multiple different
I
aspects.
understand that.
Multiple different, largely for fuels reduction, but also for recreation and trails projects. And if you want to maybe outline some
Well,
of
both
them.
of those, fuels reduction is obviously part of that too. Yes, thanks.
Mayor, Commissioner Beaver, the reason that you don't see the grants in the budget is the way we handle grants. We carry them over after the budget's complete, because you have to know at the end of June what you've expended out of your grants before you carry them into the next budgeting year. So most of our recreation grants are project specific, as the grant that recently went through commission to purchase the vaulted restroom facility at the old shooting range. That's what a lot of the grants look like, is it's specific to a project. That particular grant will be carried over into the next budget year in July, because we won't be installing that facility until September. And that's very common, that we end up carrying grants over that are used partially consumed, or we haven't started the project at all. But you don't see them on this sheet because they don't appear until we make that financial move in July.
Well, then it needs to be someplace, and whether you place it into the budget spreadsheets, or you just simply have a running grant accountability system, something that shows that you receive grants for these specific projects, even the vault, toilet, and this is when they'll be expended. And you know, I get that some things are going to flop into one fiscal year and then another, but there really needs to be a way to track this out. I frankly find it somewhat a mystery that, you know, money was expended here and it came from there. Well, when?
So
That sort of thing.
yeah, Mayor, because you will approve, the commission approves all the grants that we receive, so all of those will come before you.
Well, I haven't been around long enough to have the opportunity to
Right.
approve anything, so really, just to get annoying. So, and I don't want to be annoying on this case. I'm just trying to get my arms around how we go forward on our trail maintenance. I think it's underfunded. one way to show that is to see what grants we've received and what they've done. And we can then, I think we can eyeball what we need still to do. I mean, it isn't hard to see. If you hike the trails at all, or you bike them or whatever, it's clearly a primary reason why people visit our town and maybe even live here. And so seeing that there's some sort of a way to follow the money and from whom, and that will help us decide whether, how much more money and how. Maybe we aren't asking all the right people to help us out. Maybe there's some grant folks out there that'd be happy to give us even more. So it's not a criticism, it's just trying to see if there's a package here that we can put together that makes sense.
Easier, I think we've got an ongoing list of grants over the years. In terms of the budget itself, grants are either anticipated or unanticipated will come from the commission, make the financial changes necessary to the budget. But that's not going to capture the history that you're talking about. So we can visit about how to approach that. Some of the information.
Well, and Kevin, I think the history is important. It doesn't have to go back a generation. It's kind of more like the last 2 or 3 years sort of thing. Rolling forward, that would probably replicate itself. But it's also to be aspirational. Some idea of where we are missing the boat and where we might go down the road.
And I believe this is the appropriate entity to ask this question. I know we continue to have this discussion of the Parks District and exploring what that would look like, what the partnership with the county looks like, and Jetco. Two others. I didn't see anything in here regarding anticipated expenditures that we might need for that development. Do you see that would be necessary, or is in the next year we're just doing it's all coming out of staff time?
Yeah, Mayor, Commissioner, you won't see that in open space anywhere. You will see in our general fund account where, due to budget restraints, we took some funding out that would go to that. But that can still be worked on with regular staff.
Please continue.
All right, so I'm going to move, if we're good with open space, I'm going to move to parks maintenance. So you'll see the beginning of parks maintenance, which is in our general fund, on page 39 of your handout. And I do have Craig Marr, who's our parks superintendent here as well. So just some highlights and accomplishments. We maintained and operated 41 city parks and last chance splash pool with reduced irrigation last summer. We were on water conservation restrictions and significant staffing challenges. We operated and maintained 77 irrigation systems, maintained over 170 acres of turf, improved and maintained over 20 miles of shared use trails and sidewalks. We made improvements to the pedestrian mall. The parks maintenance maintains the pedestrian mall. Maintained and updated Kendrick Field and Memorial Playground, and installed an irrigation well to increase access to water quality resources in Waukesha Park. And there's a community garden there. We also completed the Barney basketball court rebuild this spring, and we have a contract in place to rebuild the Barney tennis courts. So our goals and capital requests, and I don't know if you all, do they get the 440? All of our capital requests for parks maintenance are in the 440 accounts, and that one.
Yeah.
So I can go over, most of our capital requests are within this, but we really work on replacing and enhancing existing infrastructure. A regional parks district is something that we have contemplated and just been part of our discussions and our goals for quite some time. That would put us at least aspirationally in a better place to be able to provide services and facilities to the larger area that our recreation department does actually serve. We are looking for a couple things in capital. You'll see in here, I believe our artificial turf for Kendrick. If you'll recall last year, we requested $250,000 to place artificial turf at Kendrick Legion Field so that we could accommodate more use of that. And that was cut down to 125. So we are requesting we're requesting that again, the 125 again. So we would have to carry that over because we weren't able to complete that project because we didn't have all of the funding. We will be carrying over fire tower restoration. We're working on restoration of the fire tower. We recently received some grant funding that the commission approved. And we have some money set aside that we'll be carrying over. You'll see in here that we're requesting an additional $150,000 for Memorial Park Playground rebuild. We had money in last year's capital requests and it was not enough. So we're going to have to carry that over and request additional funding to replace the Memorial Park Playground. We also have several capital requests. We have a 441 account. And if you want to look at that, our 441 account is on page 69 of your packets. And that is our parks improvement. Our park use fees go into this account and it has been building. We've used it for some projects, but we plan on using it for more capital and or park improvement projects. So we have in that account capital requests. We would be asking for general fee increases or proposing general fee increases for cost recovery moving forward. The national average for cost recovery for general parks is approximately 30%. Our current cost recovery is more below 20%. So we are going to be proposing fee increases that get us closer to that 30% cost recovery. And I also wanted to point out, and this would be in the 441 account as well, we don't have this currently budgeted in there just because this is an issue that's come up in the last couple of days. There's been some damage to the Veterans Memorial and Memorial Park. And we are going to set aside $10,000 to look at feasibility, design, or potentially a grant match to restore that Veterans Memorial. In the meantime, we potentially could do some patchwork on that, but wanted to make you guys aware of that, that's something that we're going to be adding to the 440. And do you have anything to add, Craig? Okay, so that's what I have for parks maintenance. Is there any questions?
Director, on the field, baseball, where are the Legion? Are they helping you make things?
So Mayor, Commission, we have a contract with Legion Baseball. Their contract is approximately $15,000 annually that they pay for use of that. That goes into our 441 account, and we can pay for improvements to the field with that.
Mayor, Commissioners, I'll just add to that they do the infield maintenance at Legion, the Legion baseball team. And so they do all the infield maintenance and a lot of the outfield maintenance as far as fertilization and all the just keeping the field playable condition for all their games. So they do contribute to the maintenance. And then they pay all the utilities at the field as well.
On the baseball question, have there been any conversations with Helena Public Schools or East Helena about if they want to get in baseball and what that would look like?
So, Mayor, Commissioner, we have had some discussions with them. They are, it is our understanding that they are going to be exploring the potential for high school baseball over the next year. They are interested in Legion Field. And so we will continue to have discussions with them. That's just more use of the field, which is the potential more need for turfing of that field.
Does that include East Helena?
They have asked as well. They are interested in reaching Kindred Field as well.
But you're just asking for the same 125 grand that you already were authorized, or you're adding now another 125?
Adding back another 100.
But they asked for 250.
Well, I remember that you guys cut it back, the previous commission cut it back in half. I got that with the idea that the expedition folks would maybe be interested in paying their another 125. Well, it's probably a good idea that they want to do that or whatever. But the school districts might want to. I mean, it shouldn't be a free date for them. They want to take up high school baseball. And I don't want to denigrate schools. They have their budgetary issues as well, but I would think those discussions would include that. American Legion by itself is not likely to ever generate 125 grand to help turf. Maybe we can, but it's taken a while. There's, by the way, a lot of sweat equity that we to puts into that area. They've got batting cages and stuff there that I didn't even know they had until they gave me a tour. They're very proud of what they do at Kendrick Legion Field, and they should be, because, well, for the last several years, they've been the only actual baseball use of that facility. And they like it. They like it there. They will do everything they can to make this thing work going forward. Have you, by the way, one more question. Are you seeking any other grants for the fire tower? 10 grand maybe isn't enough, so, you know, more.
Mayor Commissioner, yes, we've been working with Cam Machado and looking for more potential grant funding for that restoration. And Mayor Commissioner, I neglected to point out 2 other capital items. The chiller for the ice rink and the cover for Memorial Park Ice Rink. As you recall, this was a conversation that was in last year's budget. I believe Commissioner Kennedy had proposed something along these lines. Yeah. We put those in there. There is a lot of value to that. We have seen shorter and shorter ability to use our ice and ice time. A cover would allow us to extend our season, and the chiller would as well.
So we're going to call that the Dean cover and the Dean chiller. Is that what we're going to do?
I will just say I'm very excited that's included. We really do not have enough activities for young people at work, adults either, and especially in the winter time beyond sledding. And I think that this is a really great opportunity to actually provide an activity on the season for more kids and adults to use. So I'm very excited.
If I might, just a quick question, Director Canozo. We don't need it right now, but I'd be curious to know what the usage rates are on the ice skating rink and what our cost recovery is on that specific. It's a super cool thing we have. It seems extremely underutilized, possibly because it's soup half the time. I just want to address that, but I would be interested to know a little bit more about usage rates and cost recovery on that, because if we make an investment, it would be great to see us sustain it.
The one other thing, and you might all have already looked at this, I know a couple of the communities, instead of doing a cover, well, some of them include a cover, but just paved the solid surface so it can be used in the summer for natural or roller derby. I don't know if that was included in the thoughts of that, but I think it's similar. It mostly was to prevent, a lot of them do it to prevent as much freeze thaw with the chiller as well, so it stays more preserved and can be used year round. I don't know if it's discussions or not, but I think in Kalispell, I mean Salmon, Idaho, or where they did it. I don't know if it was just a concrete slab, but it was a more or less a surface like that.
Yeah, Mayor Commissioner, I don't believe that was part of our cost.
I think it's part of the, to get the chiller installed, you need to have some kind
Okay,
of hard
okay,
surface
right,
to have it underneath, so that would be part of it.
Please continue. Sorry.
All right, we'll move to urban forestry as part of our parks maintenance division. Urban forestry is a special assessment district. It is on page 55 of your packet. So some of our accomplishments this year in urban forestry, we hosted a statewide tree climber safety workshop and an emerald ash borer detection workshop in partnership with Montana State University. The urban forestry staff pruned 832 trees. They removed 124 trees, planted 168 new trees, and donated more than 40 cords of firewood to the low income energy assistance program. This is a special district that will have to be reauthorized, I believe, per the new legislation that was passed in the last session. We also will potentially need to look at increasing our assessment for urban forestry as well. We do have appropriate reserves right now, but we have increased personnel costs, and for future fiscal years, as well as reauthorization.
Does the reauthorization include the rate, or is it just reauthorization?
It's happened in the last legislative session with a grant fund, certain special districts, 10 years where you would have to renew them for whatever reason. It's a bad piece of legislation, but we have to live with it. The rates, the whole process.
Yeah. Okay. Is it two separate? Would it be two separate questions, like the question for reauthorization and the question for rate?
Well, it's the creation, the recreation of the district where people can protest, and we go through that process. It's not a vote.
Okay, got it.
How do you reauthorize without a vote?
Well, you go through the creation of a special district. Does this, I don't think this requires a vote. But we'll have to look.
But yeah, I
protest
out. The commission votes on
The
that.
commission.
Has to
vote.
approve this.
Yeah, and then you have a protest period.
I got it.
And then you come back.
So the is the entire city of Helena,
No, it's just certain districts and.
like my side of town where there's a lot of.
Well, the conversation started in Billings, but it made its way to Helena. And it's, I guess, the way I would want to look at it in Helena. It's a very successful program. It gives us the opportunity to talk about how it works and recreate.
It's a terrific program. I mean,
Absolutely.
all you have to do is live in the ash trees in this town that knows they're dying, falling apart, hanging over the street anytime about to drop on your car at the next windstorm. And it's good to see the crews out working all right now, right down the street from my house. So I'm a little stressed to now learn the legislature one more time focus the eye with a sharp stick. And, so what can we say? But presumptively, you'll be coming forward with what we have to do. Because this is a program that's successful. Not only are we taking care of old trees, we're planting new ones all over the place. And not just, by the way, in my part of town. I know that with Growing Friends of Helena, you're doing some work too. In other places around town where there aren't as many trees. Too bad. It should have them. This would be good. So this is a very successful program. Helena will be proud of its urban forestry. This is super stuff.
Okay, I'm going to move to briefly just run and touch on our recreation program, which is on page 48. This is also a general fund program. Just some highlights of the aquatics and recreation department hosted over 22,000 visitors and 10 special events at Last Chance Splash and Pool, and educated over 1,000 kids through swimming lessons. We provided last year 315 tennis lessons, 34 pickleball lessons, and ice skating classes at Memorial Park were provided for the community. If you'll recall, last year we were unable to run the Case Kids program. This is part of our recreation program. This year, thanks in part to the new wages, our new seasonal wages, we are going to be able to run the Case Kids program. We have seen a marked difference in how we were able to hire this year. We had a lot of applicants, a lot of good applicants. We are going to be able to staff the pool, the golf course, and the Case Kids recreation program. And that was a huge change from last year. So wanted to definitely make you guys aware of that. Our parks program relies heavily on a seasonal workforce. We don't run a parks program without seasonals. So yeah, that. Any questions on that?
Any comments or questions for Director Mendoza?
It's good to have salaries that people like to work for. Good to have an impact on things.
Nope, I have two more funds. I apologize there. The next fund is our golf course fund. You'll find on page 71 of your packet. The golf course is an enterprise fund that has turned into, and I have both Todd Fitterer, who's our operations manager, and Steve Link, he's our golf course superintendent here, to answer any questions you might have. The golf fund is an enterprise fund. It's turned into a year-round operation and recreation amenity for the community. Our goals there are to grow the game of golf, appeal to youth audiences. We provide green space out there, tournaments, frisbee golf tournaments, cross-country skiing, cross-country running, walking, entertainment, dining, special events, and we have golf simulators and golf simulator leagues. We have had some challenges with this enterprise fund over the last several years. We took on significant debt services when we built the new restaurant, and we realized almost $500,000 in revenue losses from COVID. We've also had significant staffing challenges. Our new wages are helping with that, but we continue to struggle with staffing, particularly the restaurant. Something or capital to highlight this year is we will be asking to replace our rental fleet of golf carts. It's the golf carts that we rent out. We realize significant revenue from that, so we are asking for, I believe is it a geo bond that we're going to be asking, or an intercap loan to fund replacement of those. We will also be proposing fee increases for next year. We increase our fees usually every fiscal year, and we will be proposing significant increased fees for next season.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, Director Pinozo, the transfer in, I think it's page 70. Where is it? Transfer in is 142,000. Can you, I tried to figure out what that goes to. Could you help me understand where that goes?
I believe, Mayor, Commissioner, and go ahead. Sheila, I'm just Sheila.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioner Reed. That is specifically for the debt service for the new lease. It's the geo bond that we took out for lease, and that covers the debt service for that particular long-term debt.
And just to follow up, if I might, how long is long-term? How many years do we have?
I think we have probably about 17 more years.
It was a
Do we have the cooler in there or the fridge? Did I ask that question? It shouldn't be asked. I don't know.
No.
Is it there now?
Mayor, Commissioner, I'll turn that over to Todd. He asked about the cooler. We do have cold storage out there. It's limited. But
Mayor Commissioner, could you repeat the question? Well, it was somewhat controversial that there was no refrigeration at meetings, and so I'm just wondering if that is being fixed at this point.
walk-in.
No, we have a walk-in crew for food storage and beer storage, and then we have a large double door freezer, a single door freezer, and then another refrigerated unit for sauces and stuff like that. We do run shy of freezer space quite quickly, but we are contracting with our current food supplier to deliver twice a week. So that we don't have the whole product and see if we can get another additional delivery. And you know, get busy when there's an emergency.
So we don't basically worked around that issue. Okay. By the way, I had lunch at Moody's, it was excellent. Just saying. Anybody wants to
Parking lot's full all the time.
It's golfing time.
Yeah. I'm not so sure that the clubhouse is underbuilt.
Oh.
There were so many people in there playing faux golf or whatever you call that.
Simulator.
And they were seriously playing it. It wasn't like just maybe. And I think there was money on the table, but I'm not saying for sure that, but they were having a good time.
So the last fund I have to go over with you is the Civic Center Fund. It's 211, it's page 62 in your packet. And I have Byron Dyke, who's our Civic Center manager here, for any questions you might have. Our notable accomplishments for this past year are that we are now fully staffed. We've had staffing challenges at the Civic Center as well. And just managing operations during COVID. We've had a full schedule there, and I turn over to you, Byron, if there's anything you want to highlight for accomplishments.
Sure. Yeah, we had like everyone, challenging, interesting year at the Civic Center, but I think we really made the most of it. We pivoted a number of times. We're experts in small Zoom meetings now, in addition to big concerts, things like that. We've had district court keeping us busy throughout. You'll see our revenues are where they would be without COVID, which I think is a pretty awesome accomplishment given all that we dealt with over there. And yeah, we're building on that momentum for full calendar for this year and more exciting stuff coming down the pipe.
So of note in the budget this year is we received a large grant, a shuttered venues grant for a little over $361,000. $351. We would like to use that grant to leverage an HVAC system at the Civic Center, including cooling and filtration. And that is, I believe, up for discussion. And you want to add any specifics to that?
Yeah, I'll just some background on the need for air conditioning over there. We just have the old, basically 100-year-old tunnel and fan system. It's unsafe to hold events in July and August. And it's, if you've been to the Civic Center, generally pretty uncomfortable temperature wise, especially in that kind of spring and fall season. So it's air conditioning, something we've been exploring for years. It's going to help generate significant revenues in the summer months, that June, July, August timeframe. We've got quite a bit of interest from the promoted partners we work with that are interested in booking dates. So that business there, just waiting, but we need to be safe to do so. Between the smoke, not having the filtration for that, and not being able to control the temperature is problematic. It also has a big impact on the, spring through fall, those shoulder seasons that are our busiest seasons. All those groups, all those users, all those attendees would benefit from an enhanced kind of experience in terms of comfort. So it's something we're excited to put before you. This shuttered venue operators grant we got for some lost revenues during COVID. And I think this is a really impactful way
to invest in the civic center, grow our revenues, which helps manage our fund support we need down the road by having that extra revenue. And then just has big impact as far as the community in downtown during those 2 or 3 months that were dark at that time, so.
So, so what's the total cost?
1.2 estimated, I think.
1.2 million. Okay, so it is 1.2 and we got 300 plus. How are we going to prioritize that if you're looking at the HVAC system?
Well, that would be our ask to the commission. I hear there's some ARPA funding, but we wanted to make sure that we got this on the docket. We do have to, just so you know, we do have to spend this money in the next
Year and a half, 2 years, something like that, and there's fairly specific ways in which it can be spent. There could be other options that would be impactful to the civic center to spend that, but I feel like it's the best path forward from where we're sitting over there. And we got an estimate of $770,000 to do the auditorium, about $440,000 to do the ballroom, and that's, you can do one and not the other. It's a possibility. I think just for users maximizing the use of the building. In fact, we have doing both. I think is a good path to go. And again, over time, something that with us having those added revenues helps us keep managing general fund support that we receive annually.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Shuttered venue, is that what?
Yeah,
Sure. And that's from whom?
It's from the mayor commissioner, from the Small Business Administration.
CARES Act.
I think it's not the CARES Act, but it was one of the packages that they put together with that. It has a long, complicated name that I can't remember. But it's a federal grant specific to venue operators, and the ticket revenue that we lost out on.
Thank you both of you for that information. I'm really pleased to hear in terms of investment in Civic Center in the same sense. I think it's great to see the meaningful investment in that building, and I think it would make a big difference. Just a quick question, page 63. It looks like fees have gone up significantly, Civic Center fees and the revenue, but the general fund transfer is basically what it was in what was proposed in 20 and 21. Can you speak a little bit to that? Because it seems like if the fees are going up, the transfer might go down, but could you help me understand that?
Mayor, Commissioner, I'd love to speak to that a little bit. So Civic Center fees is fees we charge folks who rent the building for space, equipment, labor. That number, 215,000 for this year, would be a record for the Civic Center. We're, the general fund and us are in some way subsidizing a lot of the activity that happens there, especially in the ballroom. These are great events, lots of nonprofits, lots of other community gathering type things. So what that number is going up, but just slightly. As far as the general fund, how it relates to that, I think we got, so over the last 5 or 6 years, we've made a concerted effort to manage that fund support down as much as possible. I think we got a little ahead of ourselves in FY20 and certainly FY21. It went back up to the kind of historical average of 450,000 last year. This is kind of getting us back on the path that we were going on. We're at 360 this year. We expect to be able to manage that down further. It's not necessarily all tied to those fees, as we fund capital projects and things like that. We lean on that fund support.
I don't need the answer on this right now, but I think in our next session or one of the future budget sessions, it would be, I think, really helpful if we could get an idea on what the I guess, time frame and dollar amount on the return on investment would be if we did invest in that HVAC system. I know that there's a severe shortage of nicer non-hotel venues for like wedding receptions, class reunions, all of that. I think that there is a lot of potential, obviously, with the Civic Center to meet that need. And most of the venues, unless it's a hotel, also don't have HVAC systems, and so everyone has the same issue. So I do think there's probably a lot of potential to capture that revenue, but I'd be really interested to know, how quickly we can recover that type of investment, because that is obviously really significant. We've already, had these budget constraints, but I think it'll be a worthwhile one when it can happen.
Mayor, Commissioner Dean, from our rough numbers that aren't totally locked in yet, I think between 8 and 10 years, thinking about 100,000 a year in revenue. We haven't quite drilled down all the way as far as that comes with increased costs. So we're kind of working through that and what that does. Does that mean we need an extra staff person? Does that, what are the implications of that? So we're still drilling down. Follow up with you.
Great, thank you.
All right, go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you. I hate to ask this. So maybe I'll just make a comment, because I really don't think the subject is necessarily for today, but one of the funds is 204, called the Civic Center Board. And as far as, which is on page 67, and as far as I know, we don't have one. And so it seems, the subject came up that Commissioner Dean and I had recently attended Common Citizens Council, and the Civic Center in general came up, and then the whole concept of the board or lack thereof. I had in my memory, it seems like we had a resolution, really, which if you kind of filter the wording on that resolution, responsibility for the establishment of the board does. And I mean, we had a steering committee that tackled the problem to sort of help us come to the place on the Civic Center board, but I think the ultimate responsibility by resolution is us, and so I think more a comment that at some point in the future we probably will need to address the work. Thank you.
So when you kick over a rock, yep. We have a board that doesn't exist.
No, we have a resolution.
Well, there's an $80,000, total expenditure, I just proposed, and I'm just asking, I mean, you did it. I'm just trying to follow up on your.
Sure. Mayor, Commissioners, the Civic Center Board, which was dissolved 2-3 years ago, they had done fundraising activity, and they left about $80,000 in that fund. I worked pretty closely with the board, and we had a real well-defined 5-year plan of kind of the priorities they had for investing their funds back in. And so that 204 budget that you see is kind of drawn off that, and their input. The board does not exist anymore, but the funds are there, and until it's spent down to zero, they still got that 204 fund.
So, Mr. Mayor, I mean, you can add 80 grand to 350 grand, and we're at 430. I mean, we're making progress here. I mean, it could end up if we can figure this out. Just saying.
Yes, anything's possible.
Mayor, I just.
Go ahead,
Maybe she doesn't think
Well,
so.
no, I wanted to address that, this is a particular fund that, we will just, dissolve as it goes, but really need to be mindful of the consideration of the donations and the fundraising and how that money can be spent. before we can allocate it out to other things.
Well, I wasn't allocating it to anything other than the civic center, but a specific item in the civic center, which maybe nobody was thinking about when they were raising money. But, okay, thank you, Sheila.
We have a couple of other funds that are kind of winding their way down to be dissolved as well. I think that there's a CDBG fund that has about $5,000 left in it. that will dissolve.
Great.
It's just a few.
It's all nickel and dime stuff in the last analysis.
Yeah.
So, okay, all right.
Let's refocus, please.
We're very focused. This is serious.
Do you have any other questions for Director Penosa? No other questions? We will turn this over. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to address the commission? Clerk, do we have any raised hands?
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I have no hands raised online and I've received no written public comment.
Thank you. Are there any final comments from the commission?
Really briefly, I just first want to say, thanks to Christie. For this budget together. I'm super excited for this year. Last month. So good. And then also I just want to say, good job to both the chiefs on the first presentation, you first run at it. So I think it was both were great. I'm very excited about Mark's budget this year too.
Any other thoughts? Go ahead.
Thank you. I just basically saying the same thing Commissioner Dean did. Thank you all very much for presentations here today, and thorough answering questions. And look forward to keeping this going. Thank you, Mr. Burke.
Final comments from the commission? Right. Well, Craig, it's nice to see you. I haven't seen you in a long time. Where have you been hiding?
Good to see you too, Mr. Mayor. I've been around, keep a low profile.
This meeting is formally adjourned. 2 hours.